What is the worst PSP game? I think overall hating and disliking something is ultimately a subjective experience. I've met people in life with radically different opinions and tastes in all things, from movies to yes, even video games. So I try to go into most aspects of life with an open mind in order to learn something. We all like different things, and just because I don't like something, that doesn't mean others will as well. Subjectivity is just that. There really is no right or wrong answer when it comes to enjoying something. However, still, thoughts ring in my head recently about what the worst possible PSP game could potentially be. Luckily or unluckily, there are a few contenders and a helpful list that you can see on screen that was provided via Metacritic. Perusing the list, I came to a game that I didn't even know existed until a few days ago. Napoleon Dynamite, the video game. Now, at first I thought maybe some joker just put the UMD version of the movie up there, because you'll find a lot of these user-created and AI-generated lists with similar issues for the PSP. But no, it's very real.
Jack. Oh God, no.
So I had no expectations going into this thing. So let's strap on in, take a sip of our best beer, and settle into Napoleon Dynamite, the video game. Oh, and this is the PS Pub, and I'm dipping right into the Mickeys on this one. Hope you guys enjoy. Keep in mind, I've gone out of my way to avoid seeing any gameplay here as of now, so this is all first impressions as I type out this script as of right now. Right off the bat, the game asks you to create a profile, which I did, and one of the positives I can say so far is that the menu music is very pleasant. Yeah, no joke, it's nice, it's pleasant, it does its job, I suppose. Plus, the game has a multiplayer function, so I guess it gets one more point than Dynasty Warriors did at least. Alright, no sense in delaying the inevitable. I just hope that this is one of those situations where the idea of a Napoleon Dynamite game is what gave it such a low score. I gotta admit, first impressions here are not great if I'm honest. But to be fair, I haven't played the game yet. Already, I can tell this is a very 2000s type of thing, if you know what I mean. It's one of those irony for the sake of irony bits, and again, also to be fair, if I was to tell you Napoleon Dynamite had a game without showing you what it would be, I guess this was what I kind of had imagined it would look like. Anyway, Napoleon Dynamite was developed by a company known as 7 Studio and published by Crave Entertainment. It was announced for release on May 9th, 2007 and officially released on October 30th, 2007. There was also a DS game that was released, did garner better reviews overall than the PSP game. Now, keep in mind, the original Napoleon Dynamite was a sleeper hit indie film that released way back in 2004. It was one of those films that's remembered somewhat fondly today, and I thought it was sort of funny at the time, but I also remember, generally speaking, a lot of people either just not getting it to outright just disliking the movie in general. I mean, this, however, is an anecdotal account from me, as the movie still has a cult status among fans, and at the time of its release, it made $46 million worldwide. After Fox Searchlight bought the rights of the movie for $4 million, which according to JoeBlow.com was 10 times the amount of the movie's original budget. I'll have all this linked below, as the article is very interesting, covering the story of Napoleon Dynamite's creation and its legacy. We here are here to talk about its video game tie-in that is less fondly remembered. Culturally, the movie did have an impact in the mid-2000s, but it seems a bit strange to me that 3 years later, they'd announce a game based on the movie. It was the late 2000s, I suppose, so anything could happen. However, there is little next to no information in regards to the game's creation online. 7 Studios doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. However, there is a website URL in the game that's dead nowadays, but its most recent hit on the Wayback Machine is now a defunct website to an Australian film studio known as 7 Studios. But if we go back a bit further to when the game was released, we see that 7 Studios was an independent developer that specialized in video games based on television shows and movies. The main website originally had a flash video that's no longer available, but the tabs checking out their other projects are still active. Specifically, I looked at October 14th, 2007, but there are hits before and after you can check out if you choose to do so. Some of their bigger credits are Disney, Fox, HBO, and Marvel Comics, so I'm a bit curious as to what other games they developed. Clicking on the website, it's a bit glitchy. I'm assuming they had a lot of clickables and such on the page, so just be warned as it's a bit rough to look at. We do see hits for Shrek 3, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Legend of Jack Sparrow, the 2 Fantastic Four movie games, and the Sopranos game, to name a few. Jumping back to an earlier year, however, we find a much more stable version of the website, the January 2nd, 2006 snapshot to be exact. Funny enough, I actually loved the first Fantastic Four game and pretty much 100%ed that game. Now, I haven't played it in years and I'm not sure if it holds up, but still funny to see this developer worked on it. As far as their other titles, I haven't played any listed on either versions of their website. If you have, let me know if they were any good. So it looks like 7 Studios' whole shtick was creating video game tie-ins to popular or upcoming project properties. Their About section boasts that the team behind the studio were all industry vets who worked on games like Command & Conquer and Spider-Man. I'm assuming the PS1 game. Like I said earlier, I can't speak to the quality of their releases overall as I've only played the Fantastic Four game for PS2. However, judging by a few of these ratings on Metacritic, they range from average to slightly below average. And slight spoiler here, but given my enjoyment level of Napoleon Dynamite the game overall, I am tempted to empathize in favor of what others say about their games. However, despite my research, I couldn't find any additional information on Napoleon Dynamite, the game. I don't like to make a habit of harassing people online, so I didn't reach out to any of the devs for further info on the game. But if any of them happen to be watching, I'd love to hear more about how and why this game was developed at the time. There is one final side note that is sort of interesting. There was an animated series that came out in 2012, so I suppose the brand was strong into the early 2010s and would account for Fox Searchlight seeking a video game adaptation of the film as a viable project. No sales figures exist that I could find online, however, a sealed copy of Napoleon Dynamite will only run you about $25 on eBay nowadays, so take from that what you will.
Idiot! Dang!
Napoleon Dynamite the game sees you play as, well, Napoleon, and you help him navigate through various events in his day-to-day life, unlocking more minigames as you complete events in the story. And that's really it. There's not a whole lot of depth here, aside from watch a cutscene that vaguely acts as a light version of Napoleon Dynamite, complete the event, and move on to the next one. As an adaptation of the source material, I think it captures the tone quite well, with a lot of the characters' deadpan responses recounting tales of their hyperbolic exploits, so kudos there if you're into that sort of thing. One of the common themes you're going to see with this one, though, is how much you enjoy or can handle the source material, because for me at least, my patience was really starting to weigh thin after the first 6 minigames. There is technically an over-encompassing plot and spoilers here, I suppose. Granted, it's nothing super deep, but early on in the game, Napoleon accidentally lets out Tina the llama in a minigame, and you spend the rest of the game looking for her. All of this culminates in a talent show at the end where you have to compete in order to get $100 to go to Pedro's quinceañera. I promise you it's not as deep as I'm making it sound. For the most part, the plot just kind of does what it wants, while occasionally bringing up that Napoleon needs to get cash for his suit and eventually finds Tina the llama. Other than that, the story is mostly superfluous and simply a means to an end in order to unlock more minigames. The single-player adventure, and really the bulk of the game, is controlling Napoleon through multiple minigames that range from okay to fairly annoying to bad to extremely frustrating. I'll cover some of the more memorable of these a bit more in depth in just a moment, but there are 31 games that you are going to play. However, a lot of these become slight deviations based off of other games. For example, there are quite a few of those press the button to aim and press the button again for power type minigames. They often find in like sports games or sports minigames. They try to change it up slightly, like have you firing arrows or bowling, but the bulk of the objectives and how it's played is relatively the same thing. There are deviations based on the shmup formula as well. For another example, everything from flying a unicorn to dragging Kip along on a bike to riding a lowrider. Again, they all play mostly the same, but with slight deviations on controls and functions. You'll get 3 lives during single player to complete a minigame in story mode. Fail to do so and you have to restart the minigame from the beginning of a round, which, trust me, the fact that they do not shoot you back to the beginning of round 1 is a mercy here. This is one of those games where it feels like there should be a base game with some side mini games, but this is in fact the core game, and boy, I very quickly started to understand the low ratings for this one. All of the mini games work fine and are responsive, but there's no real substance here. You can play them again on harder difficulties and attempt to gain trophies, but for me, after the first time through, I found myself just kinda done. Even at the time of this game's release, you could find better free games on stuff like Newgrounds to play that offered the same depth and most times even more depth with a deeper and better game overall. I should mention, as you collect gold medals, you can unlock more trinkets that unlock extra mini games that range from a chalkboard that you can draw on to a magnet game to give Pedro hair. So that's, something at least. There's also another tab with a Crusader helmet, among other things, and I'll be honest, I have no idea what they're used for, but they are here. Also, for the love of God, do not press new game because it will erase all of your records and progress up to that point. And trust me, just getting out of the first 6 mini games is going to be hard enough as is. You can still reload your save up to this point, but if you save over your file, then that's it. The game doesn't really have a running save feature for a profile, if that makes sense. The single player only clocks in at a little over 3 hours, and boy, you're going to feel every single one of those 3 hours because you're not going to want to repeat some of these mini games, as the difficulty of one of the first mini games to me was just pure insanity. And I found this whole thing out when I wanted to try and get extra footage for the menus, but unfortunately, once you have completed the game, if you continue, all you'll see is the game's ending. The menus and running into a pit like this could have used a bit more optimization. Let's take a quick break from the core gameplay to talk about the presentation, as I want to at least cover the more positive and subjectively positive aspects of the game. Visually, Napoleon Dynamite is striking. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing, but I can guarantee there is not another game out there that shares a similar style. It's like a cross between a Terrence and Phillip episode mixed with something you'd find like on a Kablam cartoon. Personally though, again, this is just subjective in my own opinion, it doesn't work for me. I find the visuals more annoying than anything. And like I said, to be fair, I'm not a fan of this style of animation in general, even on shows like Kablam, so it was never going to appeal to me. However, 2 things I'll say is that the devs really did nail the style of Napoleon Dynamite. Capturing the spirit of the movie and the art style is cohesive throughout the whole thing, so all things considered, job well done on the part of the devs to make it feel like a Napoleon Dynamite video game. I think it'd be easy to just make fun of the visuals, but that was the job the devs were hired to do, so despite my subjective opinion, I'd say mission accomplished. The visuals work here, but for the record, I'm not a fan. The second thing being, if you do appreciate a visual style like this, or just something a bit off the cuff or different, I think you'll actually find the visuals somewhat decent to enjoy. And if you're a fan of the source material, you'll probably get a kick out of the visual style more so than I did. There's a handful of songs that are, in my opinion, the highlight of the game. The rhythm game songs did grate on me a bit, mostly because the beat didn't change at all throughout the course of the minigame, and you feel every single minute that passes by during this minigame. Still, the minigame selection music in story mode / the main menus themes are somewhat pleasant. They do kind of invite you into a chill atmosphere overall, and I think that's pretty nice. I can see some people finding it annoying after a while, but I did kind of find it somewhat pleasant to listen to at first. So overall, the music selection, like most of the game itself, is a bit of a mixed bag overall from a subjective standpoint. I also do want to mention that in capturing footage for multiplayer, yeah, like I said, there is a multiplayer function. My brother's first reaction was, wow, it sounds like the music doesn't even want to be here. And yeah, playing this for more than a few hours, I started to feel the same way. I definitely did not want to be here anymore. Anyway, in terms of the audio design, Napoleon will make quips now and again, which sound okay. They're clearly ripped straight from the movie, but they are clear and concise. However, I hope you enjoy the quips because you will hear them a lot throughout this game. Whether that's collecting something or failing a minigame, Napoleon has no quarrel with repeating the same things to say, over and over and over again.
You have the worst reflexes of all time. I've been practicing. Idiot! That one's good. Lucky. There's a lot more where this came from. Sweet!
Okay, so the minigames themselves. There are 31 in total, like I mentioned, with a lot of deviations here and there. So I'll cover the more memorable ones, as in the best and the worst from descending order. Truth be told, the shmup one of Napoleon riding a unicorn is okay, and probably the best of the minigames in my opinion. This honestly is probably because I'm a huge shmup fan in general, so anytime I get to play one, even a janky one, I can kind of find some sort of enjoyment out of it. It's serviceable at best. I wouldn't quite call it good, but it's a solid 5 out of 10 in terms of shmup quality. I've played worse, but I've also played a lot better. Then that's the highest praise here. And this actually correlates out to the rest of the game as a whole, is that the hit detection is surprisingly tight and spot on. Controls are responsive, and you never get the feeling like the controls of the game are holding you back. The design of some of these, however, we'll get into it. We'll get into it, don't worry. Dodgeball was actually pretty fun once I figured it out, but after a few minutes, you're just kind of over it. The dancing minigame, you can tell they spent the most time on because there are 5 instances, including the talent show at the end, where you'll be required to play the rhythm game, including the 3 additional times at the end of the talent show, where you'll face off against 3 other contestants. It's serviceable again, albeit even on handheld, I imagine there has to be better rhythm games out there that you could play over this. Maybe I'll give Hannah Montana, the PSP game, a shot next, I don't know. So let's start getting into some of the, I guess, not so great games. Time Machine, where it doesn't do a good job explaining what you're supposed to do. It's set up like all these pieces need to connect with one another, and you'll spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, well, which piece is supposed to go into which, going into which, and so on and so forth. However, I eventually realized it was just a lame variation of Tetris, where you just have to put everything on the board to fit. And it felt like a complete waste of time, honestly. The challenge came from figuring out what you're supposed to do versus actually putting the pieces on there. Pinata Smash. Now, at first, it isn't too bad till you get to round 3. The pinata will swing low, medium, and high, and you have to time your hit accordingly. Miss the pinata and you lose your combo, and the amount of candy that pops out goes down. I think this is one of the few times where I felt the candy drop was inconsistent. However, that may have just been me getting frustrated with the game. And good luck trying to hit this thing when you can barely see it on screen at all, and it flies so quickly that you're just not going to have enough time to hit it before it hits you. I think the worst part about this minigame is it deceptively looks like it wouldn't be that hard, but the second you get to round 3 you realize that no, this minigame just sucks. The worst, however, comes right at the beginning of the story, and I imagine probably resulted in a lot of GameStop trade-ins right after this game launched. That is computer hacking skills. My god, this sees you guiding a spark from one side of the screen to the other by rearranging pieces on the circuit board. That doesn't sound so bad, right? Well, you also need to contend with computer virus enemies that will send the spark back to the beginning. Making it worse as you progress in the rounds, you'll be forced to change directions of multiple pieces, which will prevent a straight line from end to end. Adding to this, you're timed. Oh, and what makes this a nightmare to play through is that if you fail on any of the rounds, they change what the circuit board looks like. So you don't have enough time to actually dissect what you're doing on any given round. Each round, your amount of time does technically increase, but on round 3, you're only going to get 1 minute and 40 seconds to figure out what you're supposed to do and execute it flawlessly. Keep in mind, if you lose 3 lives, you lose the round. So you will be forced to play different variations of the board constantly. Mercifully, you don't start all 3 rounds over, but it's still unbelievably painful. And I will say, if they would have had it to where you started all the the rounds over, I don't think I would have made it past the first 6 minigames. There are technically quote-unquote power-ups you can get during this minigame, but good luck not only getting to them, but finding any use at all. Round 3 specifically, you only get an extra time power-up, which honestly, it doesn't really help. Now, in fairness, you can speed up the game board by holding triangle. This will allow you to try out different tile combinations faster, yet you'll still need to contend with the viruses that act along the same pathways as the spark you're guiding. One false step and they'll eat your lives completely. If this was closer to the end of the game, I can see forgiving it a little bit, but this is potentially the first mini game that a player can choose to play. And man, I wouldn't blame anybody who gave up on this game after trying this out for the first time. Ultimately, I got lucky when I was able to get past this, and it took me way too long to do it, and I will never go back to it again for the remainder of my life if I can. Which, if I ever do a commentary playthrough on the PS Pub Plays channel, it's probably just going to be multiplayer, but if you guys want to see me go through the entire story mode, I mean, I guess I could, but I'd probably just drag my brother along too, because oh my god, I do not want to play this game again. There is a multiplayer function in the game that I originally wasn't going to cover, mostly because I just wanted this game to be done with, but I figured I would do my due diligence and check it out. It's basically just 8 mini games here that have a multiplayer function, 2 of which are exclusive to multiplayer. The first being where you toss steak with Uncle Rico, and the wizard game where you go collect keys and the other player hunts you, and they're as riveting as they sound. We had the most fun playing the Rex Kwon Do mini game, but that's mostly because it's just a bad fighting game, but it was at least kind of fun. And I do have to admit, we did have a little fun with these overall. It basically just evolved into us cracking jokes about the game, riffing and laughing at it, but kudos to it for bringing out at least a little bit of enjoyment for us. And you can play with another person who either has the game through ad hoc, but Napoleon Dynamite does also have game sharing, so that's a plus there, I suppose. Alright, so the game was made with a certain audience type in mind. I try to keep these things optimistic on my channel here because I don't want this channel to turn into a hyperbolic scream fest or anything like that. But this game, to me at least, was very painful to play, but mostly because of the circuit breaker game. And honestly, most of the game's runtime was literally just me trying to get past that one. I imagine some people might find it a bit easier, but I still have nightmares thinking about it. Again, trying to keep it away from the hyperbolic scream fest here, but it is not a very good mini game. Now, obviously, the easy solution is just to turn the game off if you don't like it, and fair enough. I know I'll never come back to this game just on a whim being like, oh, I want to play some Napoleon Dynamite today. That's just not going to happen. However, I could actually see this game ultimately doing a bit of damage to the original movie overall, mainly in part because of the constant quips from Napoleon himself. His one-liners and jokes are funny in the movie, but constantly hearing them over and 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 over again after failing a challenge would make even the most die-hard Napoleon Dynamite fans become fatigued from the Napoleon experience. And God help you if you're just a casual fan of the franchise. On Metacritic, Napoleon Dynamite, the video game, got a 37 from the critics, and the user score is TBD with 4 ratings. I gave it a 3 personally, while the user scores only have 2 reviews, one giving it a 4 with more of an in-depth review. Meanwhile, Napoleon himself gave it a 10 for being the best game ever. I guess that polarizing opinion sums the experience and probably the film's initial reception pretty well. Some people get it and appreciate the ironic / socially awkward humor. Others just don't care or outright dislike the product, I suppose. At its worst, Napoleon Dynamite the game is frustrating and a waste of time. Meanwhile, at its best, I can see some fans appreciating the work put into it by capturing the spirit of the original film. If you are able, and most important of all, willing to take on this challenge, I dare say take breaks because this game can and will break you. Make sure to like and sub and let me know of other games to cover as well if you enjoyed watching this video. Anyway, until next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.